All right, Brian Davis Races, and you can too. Today we're in, I think, Wauwatosa, otherwise known as East Tosa, Wisconsin. It's raining, shocker, but the family's here. Say hi, family.
Hi.
Hi, family.
Hi.
Paula Davis Races, Isabel Davis Races, Isaac Davis Races, and you can too. All right, a little rain delay. We'll see if we get our race underway. We had some thunder and lightning on the way down, so we'll see. It's a pretty nasty storm today. This is the last day of racing. Cool town. I really like this race. I hope it goes off. We are racing in the other direction than I remember racing last time, so that should be fun. Yeah. Let's go find a coffee shop. Hey, Brian Davis Races, and you can too. Thank you for checking out the channel. This is the last day of Tour of America's Dairyland 2019 in beautiful East Tosa, Wisconsin. So, for those of you who don't know, I live about an hour and a half from most of the racing in Wisconsin. And on the way down to this race, there was some nasty, nasty weather. So, it was an accident. I was delayed a little bit. No big deal, made it on time. That's why you leave early, I guess. But was really interesting to see what was going to happen for our race. So it literally dried up in probably like 15 minutes prior to our race. The rain, maybe 20 minutes prior to our race, stopped. We had some delays on the day, and then it got pretty warm. So the heat came out and dried up the roads pretty quick. There was a couple of these turns that were still going to be wet because they're shielded by trees, but for the most part, pretty dry course. Speaking of course, very, very straightforward course. Not a lot of magic to this one in terms of technical turns, but I do like this course. It runs through this little downtown area, which is really cool. There's lots of neat shops and restaurants and things like that down here. So I always look forward to grabbing some tacos or a burrito after this race because I am done racing and it is time to take a little bit of a break. So really cool that the family came down. I so appreciate it when they show up. It's just neat. The kids go crazy. They're over there on the left, right at that intersection on chairs. And there was a couple times in this race that I definitely needed their presence to stay in the race because I was struggling. So throughout this week, I'll do a recap video of Tour of America's Dairyland, but throughout this week, there's definitely been some changes in tactics and styles that I've been trying. And for the most part, I settled on, at least at Tour of America's Dairyland, to settle toward the back and try to get through the first 13 minutes of the race. And today was no exception. So that if my theory on bike racing, at least in the categories that I do, in the area that I do, is the first 10 to 13 minutes of a bike race are pretty brutal, and then after that, there's always going to be a little bit of a let-up. Now, if you're a new racer, you're going to find those let-ups happen more often. The lower your category. So as a Category 5 racer, there's plenty of let-up, 4, 3, 2, 1. As you move up the ranks, there gets to be less and less of these moments to sort of catch your breath. And you'll see it even in the pro field where they'll race first 15 minutes, pretty bonkers, and then something will happen. Either a move will go off the front, or there'll be some sort of disruption, or the field will just try to shuffle around and find new people who want to do the work. And you almost always get this sort of lull, which is great. So the thing is, like, it's easy to say, well, that's when you should attack, but it's also when you're resting. Now, here we are 4 minutes into the race. I see a move going up the road, and I'm pretty nervous about that. So I'm going to make the leap here, right in front of the family. Maybe that helped. So I'm going to make the leap to grab this wheel, and I'm going to expend some pretty significant watts. So the last few days there was this threat of these moves moving off the front, and I didn't want to be left out today. So I thought I'd give it a go, and getting up to this group was significantly harder than I anticipated. And you can see the group behind me is not giving up without a fight. I thought, if you would have asked me what my gap was to that group, I thought, well, certainly I leapt away from them. I'm not worried about them catching up, but they bridge right up with us. So a couple lessons I learned throughout the week is if you are going to bridge up to a group, you have to make absolutely sure that you are alone and not doing the work of the group, which I feel like I did in that case. I was pretty far off the front before they started pulling, but it's impressive how hard that person behind me is working to catch us. And I think maybe if I had any critique of that move, he may have been the one that brought up the move. It's hard to see behind him right now. He might be clear. I shouldn't throw him under the bus. Yep, he's clear. Okay. But eventually they catch us. So, you know, the theory that I had getting up to this group is like, well, when I get up there, I'll take a little bit of a breather, and then I'll start working with the group and start doing some pulling. And, you know, this is a nice little move of 10 people out of probably a 50-man field, 45-man field. So I felt pretty good about that. Yeah. So I just want to also recognize that I'm doing this voiceover 6 days, 5 days after this race. And so during Tour of America's Dairyland, I was getting these videos out day by day and doing the voiceover later the same day, or worst case the next morning after doing these races. There you can see I just sort of blew up. I look back, I see the crowd, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to drift to the back here and collect my thoughts. Anyway, the point of that story is that I have a awful memory, so I forget necessarily what's going to happen. I remember making this move, and I remember the result of all the pain in my legs. So that was definitely something I remember. But the rest of the race, I'm not sure how much I'm going to remember. So we'll see. I know this took me an awful long time to recover from, mentally and physically, just to sort of try to remind myself that that's not necessarily my forte, jumping up to groups like that. I'm glad that I did it again, and this has happened a couple times throughout the week. I'm glad that I did it, but it's really not my strong suit. So I feel like I need to be more picky about those types of movements when I jump up to those groups, because it expels so much energy from me that it's really difficult for me to recover, at least in the current shade of fitness that I'm in at the moment. So now I'm quite sure that I looked at the time on my Garmin, and we're only 7 minutes into this race, and I'm sure that induced some panic in my brain about being able to make it to where I need to. So again, my family there, I think if they had not been there, I would have seriously thought about letting go of that race when I pulled off to the left on the last lap and had this idea that I would drift to the back. Getting back onto the tail end of that group was significantly harder than I was hoping it would be. So I'm not sure that I would have stuck with it had my family not been there, but you know, they drive all the way down there. It's the last day of racing. I got to give them more than 5 minutes of my of effort, right? So that's my goal now. My next little micro goal at this point is to make it to 13 minutes and see what happens. So this race was, being the last day of this tour, I was just floored by how much horsepower there was in going into this race for the first 10 or 15 minutes. We were pretty bonkers. I mean, I don't know my average speed. I think the average speed for the race was 27.1 miles per hour, which was, I think, maybe our second fastest race. So we were just scooting in the first 10 minutes, though. And then there's a pretty good lull where we settle down. And then the rest of the race was really just about trying to maintain my position. There was a split. Eventually a split was forced, and I think, man, I forget what my wife told me, how many riders were up the road. Maybe 5 riders were up the road. I can't remember. I'm not totally sure. That's why it's really important for me to do these voiceover videos immediately after. And I would encourage you to do the same thing. If you are doing voiceovers, or not necessarily voiceovers, but if you're doing recordings, it's really important to go home and record your findings or your education, your lessons, as quickly after the race as possible. And maybe if you don't do the recording, that's fine too, but you just write those things down. Eventually you see trends and patterns and you start to think, okay, I can work on this aspect of my game during training, or I can try to eliminate that tendency I have of doing X, Y, and Z. So I'm a big fan of kind of doing a Monday morning quarterback and looking at what you did right and what you did wrong. So some things that I learned, again, I'll do a wrap-up video at some point for the whole week, but some things I learned through this week is that I've been taking really strange lines through turns when I'm with the group. For whatever reason, I don't just stick in the group. So that's weird to me and was insightful. Some things I also noticed, that I'm not pedaling right up into the turns, or I'm not being aggressive. Like, this is a good example. I mean, I know I'm... anyway, there's not a whole lot of places to go, but this is a good example. When I slow down, well, why do I slow down? I can keep pedaling. I can probably go inside on the corner without, I think the word dive bombing is overused, but I can go on the inside of the corner. I can be safe still, but I can still be aggressive and move my way up one rider at a time. So that was something I wanted to think about too, is just what does it mean to be moving up? So typically people talk about moving up, and it's, this theory that you're going to move up in the last 2 laps. You're going to get yourself to the front, and that's easier said than done. So, throughout this series, some of my thoughts were, okay, can I chip away at this with like 5 to go? Can I get 1 rider? Can I get 1 more rider? Can I get 1 more rider? And again, those little micro goals are really, I think, the key to getting past the fatigue that you're feeling at any given moment, and then focusing on what you're trying to accomplish in the race. So here we're at the 11-minute mark, still just totally under the gun, definitely feeling the pressure. My heart rate's not necessarily showing that, but again, this is after a week of racing. I'm pretty spent. It was when I woke up Saturday morning, this is on a Sunday, when I woke up Saturday morning, my legs were totally sore. And then we went and raced a really hard race. And then when I woke up again this morning, on Sunday morning, legs totally sore, not looking forward to racing, but also looking forward to being the last day and going to get some tacos, burritos, margaritas, all that kind of stuff after my week. So there was a little motivation, and then I knew the family was coming too, so that's always awesome. That's my teammate behind me, Johnny. I think I'm sure him and I were the only 2 Diablo cycling members in this race. And after the race, Johnny said that he sort of changed his tactic today completely. So for the previous part of the week, he was always very mindful of being up in the front third of the race, and after every race, he'd be like, man, you did such a great job staying up there. But typically in the end of the races, I would sprint past him, not for any real gain, but I would have a little more pop at the end. So I think Johnny wanted to try a different tactic today, to hang out at the back, see if he can get some rest. He did have a crash earlier in the week that he's recovering from, so that definitely takes some wind out of your sails. A couple of these riders were weekend riders. They weren't throughout the whole week. So there is some fresh horsepower in the group. The Monday through Friday riders were still the ones that the front just forcing the issue too, but they're also significantly talented riders, so I don't think those extra 5 days of racing is a huge impact for them. So in any event, that's what's happening in this race. So I think this is where I'm going to do a split here pretty soon and skip to the last few laps, because there's just a lot of me hanging out in the back trying to get some rest. So let me take a look at the video and I'll rejoin here in a second. Okay, so I'm going to skip to 45 minutes into this race. I believe we raced for 55 or 50, I don't remember. So anyway, the race is nearing an end here. So little move off the front. And I'm just going to close this up. Now you're going to see a counter in a second. So there goes Carlos. Big move. I think he had already wrapped up the sprinter's jersey by this point. So I think he's just out there to go for gold here. Alright, so now I've learned my lesson by not bringing up the group. I'm going to let a little bit of a gap open. These guys come around me. I'm going to let them do some work. And then for whatever reason, the field just sort of lets us go. And I'm quite sure at some point here I turn around and I see we have a really good gap. I don't recall if I communicated that to these 2 gentlemen. But we have, I mean, you can see the gap in the rear view that we have plenty of free clearance here. And then Carlos and the other rider are ahead of us, so we could have been a nice little 5-man group here in the middle. I believe there is already a move that's up the road for the race win. But yeah, again, this is a good example of definitely burning a match here, right? This is a huge effort, and I don't even pull. But I caught a wheel, I went with the momentum, so I essentially got a free ride up to this move. And then no one wants to come around after, I think Carlos is going to, I think he did that entire lap, I think, if I remember correctly. And then I think at this point I'm happy to go up and work, but I'm looking around and seeing the group closing in. I'm like, this is not going to end well. So you will not see me go up to the front because the field has caught us. So I think when I catch Carlos here, I tell him I didn't do it that time. So earlier in the week I brought the field up to him. So I definitely did not do it that time. Alright. I got on the front and I don't want to be there, so I'm just going to relax, and then I know that somebody's going to come storming by here anytime. Yeah. Just a lot of fun to race with people that are significantly better than you. I really enjoy that part. So Carlos is one of those folks. I learn a lot racing with Carlos, and he's gracious enough to teach some lessons along the way, so I really appreciate that. And just an incredibly strong rider. Definitely is motivating to ride with folks that are at that level. Now Carlos is still pushing, and I thought, well, okay, I'll let him go. Somebody else will put in a little more work, and I can shift my way to the back here. So that's what I do. Now, in retrospect, it probably would have been, I can see my heart rate is pretty pegged, and I know I'm suffering, but that would have maybe been a good time to stay up toward the front. So I'm going to stay with this group, but I know that, because I know where I finished in this race, that at some point something happens here, and I let a whole slew of people get by me, because I'm in a good spot here. There's not an extraordinary, I missed the lap counter on the last run, but there's not too many laps left, and somehow I go from the first 15 riders to the last 15 riders in the last lap or two. So we'll see if we can catch the lap counter on the next go-round. I'm curious. I guess I can look ahead and see how many miles are left. I think not very many. This might be second to last lap, actually. So that's a good, like I let that Velocause rider get by me, the black and yellow kit. That would have been a good, this would have been a good time to be moving up instead of letting people go by me. So now, and just like that in a flash, I am 30 riders back, and 15, 20, well, 25. Okay, now I'm just going to continue to let people go right by me. And that's not what you want to have happen when you're nearing the end of a race. So I know I was out of gas, so I'm not going to beat myself up over this, but there's definitely some things I want to work on going into next year, or thinking about next year already. It's just really trying to figure out a way to build more of a base so I can do these last 2-3 laps at a really high level and then still find something to sprint with. But alright, let's see if we can get a lap count here. 1 lap. Alright, this is the last lap, and you can see I'm buried way in the back. Like, it's such a short course with only 4 little corners like that. There's not a whole lot you can do, and I know I'm just gassed. I'm ready for this week to be over, to be honest with you. So it's okay. As I made it this far without crashing and messing up my skin, I'm not sure how excited I am to go up there and mix it up with the front. Not that that was even an option at the speeds that they're at. My ability to close on 15 people is, it's just not going to happen. So, although if it was going to happen, that was my moment right there. If I would have hit that hard, sprinted up the gutter, I would have been 10th wheel instead of 25th wheel, and then there would have been a chance, right? But not even a chance for podium, because the lead group's way up the road. They're a minute ahead of us, or 2, whatever the case is. So they never did lap us, which could have totally been on purpose. I did manage to get myself on the inside of this turn, which is absolutely where I wanted to be from the start of the race. The inside of all these turns actually were probably the preferable line for safety and for speed, because none of them are awfully insanely tight. That one we just went through a second ago is the tightest one, because you go from a slightly larger road to a slightly skinnier road, and then you come out here and dump out into a big road. So, yeah, you see my standing still sprint, not catching, not losing, just sort of standing still. And that was Carlos, totally blown from the effort, so he must have pulled really hard in the last lap to help a teammate or do something, and he's totally gassed. And that's how you should finish a race. So that is the end of Tour of America's Dairyland 2019. I want to thank everybody for watching. The goal on this channel is to grow our sport, grow our knowledge, and grow our fitness. Hopefully I delivered that to you today. I have a few more clips after this race of the week, and please do subscribe because I will have a recap video of some of my top lessons. So thanks for watching Brian Davis Races. Okay, Brian Davis Races, and you can too. That is the end of the 2019 Tour of America's Dairyland. All done, survived, a lot of fun, worked really hard. Can't wait to do it again next year. Thank you, Tour of America's Dairyland. Thank you for the volunteers. Thank you to the organization. Thank you to the other racers. Had a blast. If you are thinking about racing your bike, I would encourage you to do so. You need some passion in your life. You guys were cheering so loud. It was good to have a cheering section today. Faux show. I think I was gonna quit, except you guys were super loud. Coke.
A slushy.
And a taco. And a slushie.